All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome back from your midwinter break for all those. Today's shir should be Leilu Nishmas, our dear friend Menachem ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear aunt Rivka Bas Gavriel Tzvi, and L'Refu Shalema Meshulam ben Sarah Rachel, and L'Refu Shalema Miriam Bas Sarah. All right. So today we start on Perek Zayin. Until now, we got a bunch of tools. Chovos HaLevavos taught us a bunch of different tools on how to gain bitachon, how to acquire it, how to think differently, how we should analyze things differently. And what we are learning today in Perek Zayin is going to be two things. First of all, just like every single thing that helps you get better, an example over here, Chovos HaLevavos gave us those tools, there are always going to be those things that are going to detract from our ability to get better at bitachon. There's going to be things that are going to work against us in our life. And so Perek Zayin is going to focus on that part. It's going to focus on being on the lookout for those things that detract from our bitachon, and as well as how to have a stronger belief in Hashem and more trust in Hashem, that even when those times where it's a little bit questionable for ourselves and our mindset, that we should do well with it and should keep on prospering further. So, we start off Perek Zayin. And so, having explained in the previous parakim that the nature of bitachon is how to acquire it, Chovos HaLevavos turns in this section, Perek Zayin, he turns to the topic of avoiding things that can interfere with bitachon. And so he says like this: since we have completed in the previous chapters of this Shaar, everything that should be said about bitachon, to the best of our understanding in the terms of explaining its guidelines and how one lives with bitachon, how we run our lives. It is now proper for us to explain which things detract from bitachon in Hashem, so that we can be on the lookout for those things and we can know how to avoid those obstacles. V'oima, and in this regard he says, Ki mafsidei shloishes hasha'arim hakoidmim b'sefer hazeh kulam mafsidim habitachon, that all things that detract from our virtues discussed in the earlier three sections of this sefer will also detract from a person's ability to maintain a true bitachon. What he means by that, actually, he talks about there's different shars from Chovos HaLevavos. He talks about over here the three earlier sections of Chovos HaLevavos: the Shaar HaYichud, Shaar Habitachon, and Shaar Avodas Elokim. Shaar HaYichud teaches us about understanding the oneness with Hashem. Shaar Habitachon teaches us about examining the world in a way that reveals Hashem's kindness, so we know how to analyze everything that goes on in the world. And then Shaar Avodas Elokim teaches us about service to Hashem. In each section, Chovos HaLevavos mentions several obstacles to the virtue discussed in that Shaar. So we see in every single one of the Shars, and each one of the Svarim, he talks about the different obstacles that we might come across in those scenarios and to teach us how to avoid them. A lot of times when you know what those obstacles are, you already see that coming and you know how to avoid them. It says when we can group together the obstacles from before, in the earlier sections, other Shars, he says there's four different obstacles. It says lack of proper amunah in Hashem, lack of appreciation for all the things that we receive from Hashem, lack of devotion to Hashem, and also arrogance. Each of these will interfere with one's bitachon as follows. If one lacks proper amunah, then he will obviously have a difficult time gaining bitachon. Have difficulty with bitachon, example, trust in Hashem. If one lacks appreciation for the gifts that he received from Hashem in the past, he does not have a strong basis for expecting help from him in the future. If one is not devoted to serving Hashem, his bitachon is not justified. We learned that in Perek Gimel. We talked about that a person who goes against Hashem's will, you can't say you're going against Hashem's will and also have the bitachon. We talked about that. And then also it says, and if one is arrogant, he will find it difficult to submit to Hashem's control and to place himself in his hands, because again, he thinks he's all that matters and he's the one who makes it happen. So now he says like this. Chovos HaLevavos now focuses on three additional obstacles that are unique to bitachon. So we spoke about these four that were unique, that were for the other shars, the other three svarim, but these three are unique to Shaar Habitachon. This is the first one is umafsid of oiv. An additional thing that will detract from a person's ability to acquire and maintain bitachon is hasichlos beinyan habayah u'medoisach hatoivos, being ignorant an example, if you're failing to learn about the power of Hashem and His ability to do things and all His strength, and in which He manages all the affairs of the world, everything that He does, you can't have bitachon and you can't be aware of these things that Hashem does for us. And he says, "Kimisha eina mevin rachmei haboire al bruav." For if one does not appreciate to the extent of Hashem's compassion He has for everything that He created, for every animal, for every living organism, v'hanagosei aleihem, and the fact that He administers them, v'hashgachosei, and He supervises them, umashloi bahem, and He rules over them, v'shehem kishurim be'isarav, and they are held by His reins. And he explains what these things mean. He says, He administers, it means that He provides the needs and manages the affairs of all His creations, that every single living organism on this world, Hashem provides the basic sustenance that they need to survive. When He says He supervises, it means that He oversees each of them individually. When He says He rules, He means that He alone controls their destiny and no one can stand in His way, meaning Hashem controls the destiny of every living thing on this planet. And they are held by His reins. That means that no one could do anything without Hashem's consent. And we learned that a few times, that in order for us to do something, we can't do something without Hashem's consent. And we have bechira, we have choice, but at the end of the day, to fulfill good or bad, we can't do that without Hashem's consent. And he says further, Lo yenuach libay v'lo yismech alav. His heart cannot rest from worries and he cannot rely on Hashem. Only when a person internalizes the knowledge that Hashem is unfailingly compassionate, that He closely supervises His beings, and that He's absolute control over them, and all of everything that He created, He's able to place His reliance completely in Hashem. And so he's saying over here that we have to submit to the fact that we have to really believe and feel inside us. We have to internalize that. We spoke about internalizing bitachon a few times. We have to internalize the concept that Hashem is the ruler of this world. Hashem makes everything happen. And then also Hashem gives all the kindness to us. And you're going to see that in a minute. He's going to talk about the kindness. But we have to realize that it's Hashem that makes all these things happen, and He makes us do what we can and what we're able to do. And therefore, once we realize that and we really internalize that, that's when we can have that full bitachon. And by lacking those different parts that we just spoke about, that's what he says, that's going to be one of the stumbling blocks that are going to work against us, because if we don't believe in that and we don't feel with that internally, we don't internalize all those different things, that's going to be a little difficult for us to have that full bitachon in Hashem. The second factor that's detrimental specifically to bitachon is umehem sichlusai b'mitzvahs habari yizbarach. When a person is ignorant of the command of Hashem, meaning of Hashem's will, what He told us to do, ritzoni loy meterose asher hizir boy lismech alav levtoyach boy. I'm referring to being unlearned in Hashem's Torah, which commands us to have bitachon in numerous different psukim, where He says, where it admonishes us to rely on Hashem for our present needs and to place trust in Hashem in the future needs. He says over here, there's different psukim, and you're going to see in a minute, that Hashem tells us to have bitachon in Him. And you're going to see some examples over here in a second, but basically what he's trying to say is it's one of the mitzvahs for us to, and we're commanded by Hashem to have bitachon and rely on Him, trust on Him for these different aspects of our life. It says in Malachi, it says, test me now with this. And over there, Hashem was talking about Meiser, that the Yidden should bring Meiser, and that Hashem says over there, this is actually an interesting part, a few people know about this, that by Meiser, Hashem says to test him, that you should give Meiser, and what's going to happen, He's going to give you back even more than what you gave. He's always going to take care of you. He's going to add to your wealth. And he says over there the words to test Hashem. You're going to see in a minute over here where we talks about people talk about that with tzedakah you should test Hashem with tzedakah. There are different people that place in the whole different ways that if you're allowed to test Hashem with tzedakah. Nowhere else does it say that you should test Hashem. Meaning, you can't test Hashem and say, oh, I'm going to go do this and this mitzvah, and therefore Hashem is going to give me back even more. Hashem is going to be much better for me. He's going to do much better by me. I'm going to go do a mitzvahs of bitachon, and then Hashem is going to give me more health. It doesn't talk about it over there. The only place where you see it says Hashem says you should test him, it says by Meiser. And it says also in the pasuk in Yeshayahu, it says Va'amra bitchu b'Hashem adiyad. Trust in Hashem forever. In order for a person to successfully acquire bitachon in Hashem, he must take to heart that Hashem commands us to trust in Him now and forever. And we see from those psukim. The psukim talk about when we trust in him, and he brings an example over here. The Dubna Maggid brings an example when he talks about why is it that he says testing in Hashem by Meiser and not anywhere else? And can we test Hashem by other places? Now, there are different ways people think about it. There's different arguments whether you're allowed to test Hashem. Most of the times you're not allowed to test Hashem, but there are certain places that you can't. People talk about it by tzedakah, that you should continue to give tzedakah. You should continue spending money on Torah things. But the Dubna Maggid brings an example that there was a merchant. The merchant had a bunch of rolls of material, of textiles, and they were all 60 yards long. And when he went to the market to sell them, some of them were thinner and some of them were thicker, the rolls, because some of the material is thicker, and so even though it's only 60 yards, it's a bigger roll. And some of the material is much thinner, like a silk, and 60 yards is a much thinner roll. And so when he came to the market, the people said, I don't trust you that the rolls are 60 yards long, and therefore we want to try it. So they took the thinnest roll and they took it out to measure that it was 60 yards long. He says that's exactly over here when it comes to Meiser, what he's talking about, and by giving tzedakah and some other places. You pull out one. We take the one that's has the biggest impact on our financial, which is taking out the one on Meiser. And over there, Hashem clearly tells us that we should do so, and he's going to take care of us, and he's going to continue adding to our wealth. Therefore, he explains that is Hashem trying to tell us, over there you can test me, but you need to have full trust in everything else that I do, that you should do my mitzvahs, do my commandments, do my will, and then I will always be good back to you. And that's what he's trying to say over here. That by Meiser, yes, we should test Hashem. We should continue giving Meiser. We shouldn't refrain from doing so. I know sometimes it's very difficult for people, especially people who struggle financially, but it says you're supposed to give Meiser and to test Hashem with that Meiser. And you should test Hashem, and Hashem will continue to give you wealth, and he'll give you back even more. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and I wish you all the best day. Have a lovely day.